The sport of off-road racing is full of incredible stories, wild characters, legends, and even villains. We cover it all on offroadracer.com, but there's only so much we can put down in an article. Sometimes we have to dig a little deeper, and that means sitting down with some of our industry's most influential characters and hitting record. Welcome to the Off-Road Racer podcast, a Mad Media production, made exclusively for offroadracer.com. Each month, we'll go beyond the dirt into the homes, shops, and lives of the most interesting and game-changing icons of our sport. You'll hear about their history, success, failure, and everything in between as we pull back the curtain and reveal the stories of their lives. I'm your host, Matt Martelli, and this is the Off-Road Racer podcast. All right, I'm Matt Martelli. This is the Off-Road Racer podcast, and I'm here with the man, Branden Sims. What's up, Branden?
How are you, buddy? Yeah, man, we're sitting here just about ready to go racing, so this is a good time to be sitting down with you. You know, I'm always in that mood and kind of the day before a race, and here we are chatting about racing.
Yeah, it's pretty cool. You were just telling me, like, this year's been jam-packed for you. You've had some life changes, and you've been able to take a few vacations.
Yeah, we have. You know, I did get engaged this year, first time in my life. So, you know, a lot of people have gone through a few different things before they found the right one. But, you know, I waited quite a while to find the right one. And here we are. I'm engaged. So I was on a beautiful trip in the Caribbean and figured that was the right time. So took that leap. And, you know, here we are. Now I'm engaged and still racing, though.
Yeah, that's cool. So, you know, you've had a pretty wild start to your year. You were there. You almost won the 500. I was, you know, we were talking earlier. I was watching the race, and you know, Brock was leading, and he was pushing so hard. You know, every time I saw him, I was like, okay, he was not going to make it to the next pit. And then we get to the next pit. I'm like, okay, he's still going at that pace. But you were on him. Yeah.
You know, here's the thing. I don't know if it's the platform or the way that the UTVs have evolved, but we're going out. We used to have to kind of drive them a little bit, you know, find that fine line. And I've been telling people years, you know, you got to find that fine line and then not go over it, because we would have belt failures or the vehicles just weren't, you know, able to be pushed as hard as they could for the entire race, because they did start, you know, fatiguing and having issues.
Sure.
It seems as though in this last year or so, Polaris has came out with the Pro R. The Can-Am guys have figured out their X3s really well. And we are pushing so hard. I mean, if we're having to run like, I don't know, 90% the entire race, 95%, and we're all pushing each other. So you got that lead pack and they kind of break away. And then everybody in that lead pack wants to win. So we're all pushing each other that much harder. And then it's basically, I mean, I'm not going to compare us to a trophy trucks, but I mean, I feel like we're in the same ballpark where their top guys are also pushing each other to basically creating one to have a failure. And they have like a group in the front that does the same thing, and we're in the same thing. We're just having a fast group that continues to push each other until somebody has a problem. But I think that we're able to push our vehicles so much harder than we've been able to in the past. I think that we've evolved. The parts have gotten stronger, bigger, and the drivers are just amazing. So we're pushing each other all really hard.
Yeah, I mean, I'm, you know, happy and not surprised about the level of competition, but you know, comparing yourself to trophy truck, I would say that the talent pool in UTVs is deeper.
I agree. You know, I think there's some great drivers in trophy truck, and a lot of those great drivers in the trophy truck also dabble in the UTV stuff.
Yeah.
You Bryce Menzies, you got quite a few guys that actually, and a lot of guys that quite, you know, maybe realize that the trophy truck, to be in the competitive winning group, you got to spend big money. And a lot of them, I think, have decided, well, you know, let's go have fun and let's go race in the UTV class. I mean, Roger Norman's a great example. I mean,
yep.
I was just talking to him. He's actually my fiance's uncle, so got a relationship with him. So I was talking to him a little bit, and he was telling me, you know, that he has absolutely enjoyed everything about the UTV racing. He says it's just extremely enjoyable, and he's done trophy trucks. He's done it all, you know.
Yeah.
So to hear somebody like that, or anybody else, you know, whether it's Bryce or whoever, you know, they've all dabbled in UTV stuff and they all enjoy it. So it's pretty cool to see that a lot of the competition is also racing in the UTVs and having a great time doing it. And the level of competition, they say, is extreme.
Yeah, I was hoping that as UTVs, you know, became, you know, such a big platform for us, that more trophy truck racers would race in UTVs, but frankly, I think a lot of them are looking at it going like, hey, I don't want to go there and like get embarrassed, right? And I don't really see it that way, and hopefully we get more of them, involved. But there's been a few, like one guy who probably just doesn't get enough shine is Rodrigo Ampudia, and that dude is a bad dude in any vehicle, right? And he's been right up there in the front in his Can-Am, and isn't one of the guys that gets a lot of spotlight. But he can win any race, and he's somebody who has a ton of experience, both truck racing in the desert, but also short course racing. He has that I don't know what to call it, that fist fight mentality, right? And if I think it's just a matter of time. But yeah, I would hope that more of the top trophy truck racers come and race in UTVs. I think it's just going to be good for them. I think it's going to be good for the UTV class as well, and it'll show like really where the talent stacks up. I liken it a lot to what goes on in Europe with F1, where a lot of the F1 drivers, in all the categories below them or the classes below them, they're all racing shifter carts, all throughout the week just to stay sharp. So hope to see more of those guys racing in UTV.
Yeah, no, it's cool to be able to stack up with all those guys and see where you actually stand, because that's why we all go race in the top, is so you can see how you are against the best guys out there. I mean, that's the only reason to go race at the biggest races out there is to see how you stack up. If you're a competitive person, you want to know how you compete with the best.
You've had a lot of big wins in your career, both big races and then championships. Mm-hmm. What's left for you to do? What do you look at? Because what's interesting to me about you is you work your ass off, but you show up to races and I don't ever see you like bummed out or burnt out or whatever. You're always like smiling, like, let's go, right?
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, we've had a lot of big wins, a lot of good races. Won the Baja 1000 last year, which is, obviously one of the Super Bowls of the racing. We've won the Mitt 400 a couple times. So we've had some good races. King of the Hammers. I think nowadays, in my opinion, winning the big races every year is more important than a championship. And sure. I kind of think that's the way it's gone with not just me, but I think the sponsors, a lot of things, because I feel like not very many people remember who won a championship, but a lot of people remember who won the big races. So we focus on going to the big races, even if we can't win a championship. We're going to we're going to hit all the big races. We're looking at that when I'm picking out my schedule. It's not necessarily, well, let's do this one because we're going to go for a championship there. Points. It's basically we're going for the big races in every series. So that's why we've got your stuff picked out. The Vegas to Reno, I think this is probably the only best in desert race we're going to hit this year, unfortunately. And then Score and. That's kind of where it looks down. And like you said, work my butt off all season or in between every race, because sometimes, I might have a part of the year where I have a month off where I don't have to be ready for 2 months, which was just happened. But now I have a race in exactly like 3 weeks after this. I have to be ready for the Baja 400, and then it's just bang, bang, bang. And at the beginning of the year, it's kind of that way too. So, you got to show up happy. You can't look, bummed. And who's going to show up bummed to go racing? So, I'm always happy to go racing.
Well, dudes show up all grumpy, like, and I'm like, hey, dude, you're driving a trophy truck or you're driving a whatever. Yeah. Like, smile a little bit. You race a Lone Star car, but you do all the prep. Do you think that gives you a technical advantage?
Yeah, for sure it does. I know 100% it does, and there's a reason why I do that is so that it does give me that advantage. I know everything about that vehicle, whether the bolt size or the torque spec or whatever needs to be done, or how to get to an item that may need to be worked on or replaced. I can, for example, actually at the Baja 500, we had an issue with an axle boot. Pretty common. Sometimes you just have a boot that fails, and I noticed it when I was out of the vehicle working on something that we had an issue with. And I actually was able to radio to my pits and tell them exactly, what size sockets they were going to need on everything. Because I said, we're coming in, we've got a boot that needs to be replaced, an axle that needs to be replaced because the boot's torn. I said, so have an axle out. This is the exact tools you're going to need. And that way when we pull in, it was done, so quick. So, it's nice to be able to know exactly what bolt it is, what it's going to take to get it. So I think it's a huge advantage to know that vehicle inside and out. I mean, would I love to have somebody prep it for me? Yeah, there's no doubt. But, kind of just hop in and drive. But having that mechanical background, knowing exactly what needs to be done or what can be done or what size it is a huge advantage, in my opinion. And that's basically the reason why I prep everything and, or have Lone Star build everything, and then I go home and assemble it all. So that way I know exactly what it takes, and that if anything fails, it's my fault, nobody else's.
Yeah. It's a lot of responsibility, but it's also like, it takes a certain type of person, right? That, I guess you can call it a control freak. But like when you've invested so much time and energy into that race, the last thing you want to be doing is like some stupid issue because, somebody didn't tighten a bolt or they cheaped out on a part or, understanding sponsorship as well. It's like, there's people that have offered you significant money you've said no to because you didn't believe in their product. We've had that conversation,
Yeah.
And so that's all part of it. How has the transition been moving from the Pro Turbo class, because you were really dialed in there. You had a really fast car, and then, the Pro R comes out, and obviously it doesn't matter who you are, there's going to be some teething issues, right?
Yeah.
And figuring out that new platform. How has that transition been for you?
So for me, that transition from the turbo vehicle that I was racing into the Pro R was actually a very, very smooth transition, only because I didn't rush the transition. I took my time, and I told, Polaris that I wasn't going to go debut a vehicle that I didn't feel confident in making it look like one of the best vehicles. I did not want to build something and throw it together, go to a race, and then have it fail.
Right.
So I was one of the ones that took the longest to get that vehicle into the race out of basically all my other teammates in Polaris. But when we went to our first race, which was the California 300, we battled with Mitchie for the overall win the entire day. Had a small issue at the very, very end. Got it fixed. It was just a tire, actually. So, I mean, unfortunately, the Barstow got us on a tire.
Yeah.
But we got tire change, whatever, and made it to the finish with a second-place finish. So our first race, going from the turbo vehicle to the Pro R, we went with a second-place finish overall, which was great.
Yeah.
Then we went from there to the Baja 1000 and got first there.
Yeah.
Then we went from Baja 1000 to King of the Hammers and got first there. So we've had a great transition, but I actually took the time to make sure that it was going to be perfect. I did not want to rush through it. And the Pro R is such a good vehicle. I didn't have to change a bunch or try a bunch of new things.
Yeah.
Most of the stuff is stock. There are items that I do change just because I need them to last longer, but for the most part, everything's pretty stock besides, a few of the things that I change. But it was a great transition for us, to be honest. I think I've raced that vehicle 7 times now, and we've been on the podium 6. So it's been a great transition for us. It's been an awesome vehicle. I'm looking forward to racing it tomorrow. It's just been great.
Racing against your dad is something that 90% of the racers in the world will never get.
I've accomplished everything I wanted to do, and now he's just like taking the reins. I want to be remembered for being a huge part of short course, not just racing, keeping it alive, helping it grow. If it comes down to the last weekend and I'm in it, the boys better watch out.
Yeah, it's interesting because, like, when I finally got to drive one, I was really impressed. And the platform is not for everybody. Like, it drives loose, right?
Yeah.
So it's a little bit of a squirrely car, but I like that. Like, I like to be busy as a driver, and I like to I guess manhandle the car a little bit. So I really like the platform, but I also, my favorite platform to date in UTVs was the Pro Turbo S. I mean, I have tens of thousands of miles in those things, all over the country, in other countries. In China, we got to rip around in them too. And I was kind of like, well, what do? You can add more horsepower to this platform, but like, what do you do to this platform to make it better? And the R is, really kind of the next step up. So it's exciting to see, that vehicle evolution and, for people out there who are considering buying a UTV, like, there's different types of UTV. If you just want something, you're on cruise mode, you probably don't need a turbo. You want the horsepower, especially if you're throwing buddies in the back of it, you definitely need a 4-seat turbo. But then go drive the Pro R, because all my friends who grew up off-roading, they all prefer the Pro R because it drives more like a race vehicle or like a high horsepower buggy. You know what I mean?
Yeah, and one of the other huge advantages, in my opinion, for the Pro R compared to the other machines that we've had in the past is the upgrades in the clutching system, honestly.
Yes.
We're not having to, at least coming from a racing standpoint, which trickles down into the consumers, because the consumers look at what the racers are using. When you're looking at nowadays, at the Baja 1000, I didn't have to change a belt.
Yeah.
Not once.
huge.
I didn't think about it.
Yeah.
The belt technology that we've got on the Pro R is so much different than what we've had to do in the past. I'm not racing off of the belt temperature anymore. It's basically, I don't have to worry about the belt anymore. So in my opinion, that's a huge difference from what we've had in the past. We've always had to worry about belts.
Right.
It's always been our limiting factor on pushing harder. Now we don't have that. So now it's not like, okay, who can make their belt last the longest? It's let's see what we can do. So that's a huge advantage in this Pro R platform, on top of the suspension, on top of everything else. But that clutch system with the belt is significantly better than anything else out there.
Yeah. Are you running 32s, or have you moved up to 35s?
So on this vehicle, I'm just running 33s because it's been working for me so well. I have 35s that I've been testing on, and I'm just trying to figure out a good time to go with that. I'm 100% confident that 35s are a great tire and a great option for that. I think actually probably 80 to 90% of the class runs a 35.
Yeah.
Depending on the race, I think Baja's probably a little bit better for a 35-inch tire.
Yeah.
A race like this, a 33 maybe, because it's not like we're going through big whoops and we're not going to have, San Felipe to worry about. This is a little bit different style of a race, Vegas to Reno is. So I think depending on the race course you're going to go to, maybe be a little bit different. But I'm just running a 33 for now. It's been working really good for me, and I really don't want to change something that's working really good for me.
No, definitely not. That was another thing that I was impressed about the platform is like, my personal driving style is I like to flow, right? Like, so the 0 to 15, whatever, right? Like, I'm not worried about being super fast in that range. But then once you put it together and you're putting kind of the flow of the vehicle and you're letting the suspension work, like, I was really stoked on the Pro R because it had the right balance of tire size, right? Yeah. And then the same, even a little bit more suspension than the previous chassis. But like, especially, down in Baja where you have just tons of big holes, right? And you would get kind of, sideways or loose, and it was hard to connect things. Now you're rolling through those things and you just let the car work. And I was smiling pretty hard. It was funny because was pre-running for the 1,000, and guys, we're not racing, but I was also chasing down $500,000 pre-runners and passing them, and they're like, "What are you doing, dude?" And I'm like, "This thing does this."
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, so it was pretty fun.
Yeah, I think it's a very solid a pre-runner for all of these teams. All these teams, if you can't go afford to buy a $500,000 luxury pre-runner. These UTVs or the Pro R, is awesome. You got four-wheel drive. You can stop anywhere and not have to worry about, getting stuck when you take back off. And they're pretty solid machines for pre-running, in my opinion. I think that's one of the best to have out there. The things that they've changed on the Pro R to make them a better machine. A lot of the stuff in the rear end, as far as the suspension geometry and the way that I'm a very anal when it comes to like alignments and stuff. I've been doing it all my life, so it's kind of important to me how the steering and the geometry works. And they've addressed that in the rear so that they've got that toe link bar in there that helps keep the tires straight throughout the entire suspension travel and everything. So they've adjusted a whole bunch of things that were kind of issues in the past on other models, and have fixed that and added to it on this platform, so it handles so much better, and it just works.
Yeah. No, it's really cool. And, mine's at the shop right now. I'm like, okay, cool. Bring it back.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So we've got some pre-running to do for the California 300. So I've been doing that in a variety of vehicles, and it's different. It's different from vehicle to vehicle. But, I did it actually quite a bit in the Kawasaki KRX, which is a great platform, especially when you put bigger tires on it, a little bit in some Can-Ams and definitely in some Razors. So it's fun to go out on the same course and go like, oh, okay, this is what this car platform is really good at, and this is what it's not good at. So no, a lot of fun there. So to this point, have you had a race that you're like, okay, this is my race?
And then it went away?
No, I mean, just one you love, some guys like the super hard, like we were talking with Piplik a while ago, and he's like, I want the UTV World Championship Havasu course back because he loved how, brutal and technical it was.
See, I might be the complete opposite because, not that I didn't like that course, but I like open and I like to go fast, and I don't really care about the technical stuff. That's boring to me.
Sure.
I want to go fast. I want to make passes at 80 miles an hour. I like the fast stuff. I like having options. I think my favorite place to race in the United States, I guess I've got two. I like the Mint 400 course. I've always liked the Mint 400 course. We've had good luck there. We've had bad luck there, but I like that course. It's got a little bit of everything. I like that, certain races can test vehicle and drivers, and I think the Mint's one of them. It's got whoops, it's got sand, it's got the infield section. It's got a little bit of everything instead of, just dirt roads. That gets a little boring to me. And I really like racing out in Johnson Valley, not necessarily the rock sections, like, I do that as well, and I enjoy that, but the desert part of Johnson Valley, or even Barstow. I don't like the tight and technical stuff as much, but I do like the open desert for some reason when there's the options and you don't have to play follow the leader.
Yeah.
I do like being able to move over, 50 feet and make a line or get on a different line and pass somebody rather than having everybody be sheep and follow each other. So I'm a big fan of that style racing. I like to go fast and I like to make passes when it's sketchy. So tight and technical is not my favorite. I can do it. It's just a little bit boring for me. I like to go fast and open it up. So obviously Mexico, I like San Felipe area because it sets the difference in drivers, I think, or their suspension or their car setup.
Sure.
And when you've got the big whoops, I feel like anybody can go fast down a dirt road. All you got to do is have the balls to hold it to the floor, And I feel like car setups a little bit and just being able to hold the floor. But now once you get to the big whoops or anything else different, you start seeing difference in car setup, suspension setup, and I run the Fox stuff on mine because I've got the Dynamics version, and I can adjust my suspension while we're driving. I think that's a huge advantage.
It's
and everybody,
a huge advantage.
There's a lot of people that are scared of that technology, and rightfully so. If it does fail, then it's kind of a pain to try to deal with that. But I haven't had it fail, so I've been racing on it for a long time, and to be able to adjust my suspension while I'm driving, whether I have a full tank of fuel or the terrain has changed or whatever it may be, I'm constantly playing with the suspension settings and changing them, or even hitting the X button when I need to. If I know a G out's coming, or like the Mint 400 is a great example because it's a loop race. So if we're doing 4 loops, I start memorizing the course. There's no doubt, So I know when a G out's coming. I know when it's going to get rough. And if a G out's coming and I know about it, I'm going to hit the X button, go through it, and soak it up, and then. But I think it's a huge advantage. So, I love anything that's rough, and I can have an advantage by using the suspension that I've worked hard to perfect.
Yeah, that's a pretty new technology still, but 100% it gives you a massive advantage. Are you running the 2.5s?
So on the Pro R, they're 3.0s.
Okay, there's 3.0s,
Yep.
yeah, so they moved up a little bit.
Yep, and they the next step up from like the Turbo S or even the Pro XP on the Turbo R, or the Pro R and Turbo R on their suspension, their live valve is we have rebound adjustment and compression adjustment through the computer itself. So it all does it simultaneously while you're driving within milliseconds, which is great. It's adjusting the suspension. You put it in Baja mode and it changes the rebound and compression just by changing it to that mode, which is great. And then once I want to get to, like, say I get to chatter bumps or something, put it back in comfort mode, loosen everything up, and then it absorbs all that a lot different. Get to the big stuff, put it back in Baja mode. It's just amazing technology in my opinion.
Yeah, the other thing that's impressive to me about Fox is like they have a whole team dedicated to race, right? Mm-hmm. And then that rad group, right, as they're called, Bobby and the whole team down there. They're developing things that are giving us advantages in racing, and then that tech then gets transferred over to street vehicles.
100% it does.
Which is, I think it's a very important thing, to talk about, because, there would be no Raptor or, bitch and Jeeps or whatever without all the race technology that we're creating, in order to go faster in these vehicles during races. And they definitely push the limits of it. It's, that package in particular, what's really interesting to me is like, I'm like, oh, okay, cool. That sounds bitchin'. So it's like done, right? Yeah. And they're like, no, it's never done. It's never going to be perfect. It's never going to be good enough. We're going to continue to evolve it. We're going to add lasers and, we're going to make them bigger, and we're going to do all this stuff. And a lot of it is over my head engineering wise, but then they break it down and explain it to me. And I'm like, okay, yeah. I mean, it was good when it first came out. And I think they're in the 4th or 5th gen of the iterations of it. And, it's still going. So that's really cool. And again, coming from you, because you're a suspension guy.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
I love technology too.
So it's not like they can be like, hey, Branden, this is going to, here's some sucky, weird marketing tactic. Good luck. It's like, no, if you don't go, if you don't win, if you don't prove it, it doesn't mean anything. So
yeah, I've been trying a bunch of new things on my cars from Fox, and the coolers that I've been running on the shocks. I've been running for over a couple of years now, and they've come to market now, and consumers can buy them. Yeah. And I've put a bunch of time in testing on them, and they're a huge upgrade. There's some other items that I've been working with Fox on that we've been working on for a couple of years now that will come down, the line and be available to consumers. But we're trying to put it through its racing paces to see how it holds up, and the advantages and disadvantages, if there are any, which usually is never the case. But there's just a lot of cool stuff coming down the pipeline for consumers, that we've been running or trying and kind of, putting through their paces. That way it's perfect for the consumers. So it's pretty cool that they're willing and wanting to continue to push the limits and with technology. And I love technology. I always have, always will. And I love to see it change. And I know a lot of people are scared of change in technology, but I think it's cool.
Yeah, I mean, I get my fear of electronics is always in the conditions that we're racing in, they're going to fail, right? And that is definitely possible. But then if you go back 20 years and you start looking at, the failures that we were having and all the technology that improved it to this point, it's pretty wild.
Yeah, for sure. And the other thing is they still make the other options. And if there's if somebody doesn't want to go that route, there's still other options out there. But I'm going to continue to go with the technology and pushing those limits. So it's really cool for me. I really enjoy that. So yeah, like I said, there any part out there has a potential for failure, especially with the conditions we're putting them through, and a lot of our driving styles are a little bit different. And some people hit rocks, some people don't. That's really hard on equipment, but. I think the technology is cool. I love it, and I hope that we can keep pushing the limit and continue to make cool, rad things.
One of the cool things about being, a UTV guy, a UTV racer, is especially sponsored, is that you get play vehicles, right?
Yeah.
And the last time we were hanging out, we were up in your area, and we went out and shot some stuff. But you were showing me some of the areas that you ride. Have you been able to get out and do some free rides lately?
This year's been a little bit different for me, a little bit busier than normal when it comes to free riding, but there's definitely no doubt that that's one of my favorite things to do when I get to go out. Usually in July I do a trip into Colorado. One of the cool things about where I live in Arizona there is everything's street legal. I mean, all my razors are street legal, so I can basically, not necessarily that I just want to go drive down the street, but I can leave from my garage and go basically a couple miles out the back door, and I'm in this mountain range, and I can just go riding up to a ghost town, have lunch, and come back down and spend an entire day and never have to load it on a trailer, which is so nice. It makes it so much easier. It's not like it takes planning. I feel like if you're in a state where you have to trailer somewhere, even if it's 5 miles.
Oh, yeah.
you have to plan it.
Yeah.
You know, I go out in my garage and I go, you know, weather's pretty nice today. My Razor's sitting there. I'm going to go hop in that. I guess even for example, I mean, 4th of July, I was actually in town this year because I was just busy. And usually I'm out of town for the 4th. But the 4th was in town, and there's this mountain right by my house. And they shot off the fireworks right below. Like, you know what? I know how to get to the top of that mountain. So I hopped in the Razor and drove up out of my neighborhood, went up to this mountain range, went to the top of the mountain, watched fireworks till 10 o'clock, and went back home. You know, I didn't have to plan anything. I just happened to look out there and go, I think I'm going to take the Razor tonight, you know? So it's pretty cool. So, yeah, I do as much play riding as possible. It's even though I do it for a career or my job, it's still one of my favorite things to do is go out and ride. You know, whether it's, like I was about to say, one of my favorite places is in Colorado. And, you know, southern Colorado there's Durango, Silverton, Ouray, Telluride area. There's some amazing mountain passes through there that you get to see terrain that I've never experienced anywhere else. And the weather's beautiful. I love camping. Take the motorhome out. It's just the only time I really feel like I can relax because I can shut everything else off. If I'm home, my shop is in my backyard. So I can't really ever relax because I can't just sit in my house and look at my shop in the backyard and not think, well, there's probably something out there I could be doing. So not very often when I'm home am I sitting in my house just relaxing. So I'm always out in my shop tinkering, whether it's on the motorhome, my trucks, my Razors, my race cars, whatever it is, I'm always tinkering. So it's never like I get to just completely wind down. When I go camping with the Razor, I can wind down because it's just relaxing for me. So yeah, that's one of my favorite things to do is obviously just go camping and go riding.
Yeah, I mean, the freedom that Arizona offers is pretty awesome. I mean, being a Californian and having to trailer everywhere, you know, to begin the ride, you know, it's a pain in the ass, right? But
it is. It's just, you know, I don't understand it, and I never will. I just don't understand if you can't connect two trails that are within 1 mile of each other. I just don't understand. It's so frustrating to me because
honestly, like even the road transfers, like it was one thing when these vehicles were like, you know, farm equipment, but now they're faster than most cars and safer, I would say. And you know, it's etiquette. You know, it's like we've done rides up in the mountains in California, and you know had highway patrol or whoever roll up on us, and they were cool. They were like, hey, you know, you're only supposed to drive on the road this far. And on that trip, we had a bunch of veterans with us that we were taking on this trip, and I'm like, hey, you know, I get it. You got a job to do, but all these guys have come back from war with blown off parts, and we're trying to show them a good time. So I'll take the ticket if you want to be that guy. But the officer was really cool. But still, it's just kind of silly in the context of, you know, all the things that we need to or that need to be governed. You know, free riding and UTVs isn't really, you know, one of them. But hey, it also gets me to do road trips to Arizona and Colorado and a lot to Baja. I mean, I'm in San Diego, so I grew up going to Baja, and it's our backyard. And it's like, you know, we're excuse me, we were just down there shaking down, you know, a Pro R and Turbo R, and man, we started out of Arindia and, you know, went south over to San Vicente and just were ripping the coast. And it's so fun. It's just like, you know, it's the freedom that you have in these vehicles, you know, and just being able to look at stuff and go like, oh, it can handle rocks. No problem. We're going to go over that rocky mountain. No problem. Yeah. You know, we're driving over these huge mountain ranges. And then we're dropping down on the beach, and we're in the sand and the rocks, and you know it's like no problem. Like I'm only worried about gas. You know what I mean? Like having an 80 mile to 100 mile range, and then you know food. You know what I mean? Like where are we going to eat tacos at? Right? So it's pretty rad, and you know it's fun because I want to do more trips. You know, in different states and different countries. You know, because this vehicle platform will allow you to go see stuff that would have been previously either impossible or very difficult to go experience.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, so I'm down. Let's put some rides together.
Let's do it. I'm down. I love it. You know, anytime. Obviously, that's my favorite pastime. So
yeah,
There's nothing else I'd rather do than go riding. It's
And the new lady's down with it?
Oh yeah,
Good.
she's in for sure. She's actually spent a little time in a race vehicle herself, so she's played and dabbled a little bit. She says she's retired now from it, but she did race the 500 a little bit, and she's done her fair share of racing. So she says she's there to support me now. So she's actually here, and I think she's out there in the tech line possibly. Who knows? But
Well, how'd your qualifying go here?
qualifying went pretty well. I mean, I've never been one that's just like the best at qualifying. I don't know what it is. If I just get nervous that I'm going to break the car before the race, or nervous about putting it on its side in front of everybody and then starting in the back. I have no idea what it is, but I've never been one to qualify in the top 3 usually. And I think we qualified 12th, which is great for me. I like chasing. I like finding out the pace by going up through the pack rather than setting the pace and not knowing what the pack is doing behind me. So we've got a solid 12th place overall UTV starting spot, which should be good. I mean, usually when we're starting, whether it's Baja, and this is a long race. I mean, 500-something miles. We got a lot of time to figure out what the pace is going to be and push.
Yeah, it's a long race and it's a fast race. So like, when you're going, when you're at the top end of your vehicle, those little mistakes happen really fast.
Yes, they do.
So I think it favors your driving style. Whereas there's other guys who are like, hey, like we were talking about, like Piplik, he loves the tight technical stuff. So when it comes to the fast stuff, it's like that may not be, his best strength, but for you, it definitely is.
Yeah, driving at 80 in the dust is quite wild. Not being able to see, it's sketchy. It gets your adrenaline going. That's probably the most adrenaline I've ever gotten, is just trying to pass at 80, 85 miles an hour, whatever it may be, and not being able to see, and just trying to break through that dust barrier to finally see some blinking lights, and hopefully that they're, following the right course and they're not going to miss a corner. Because if they miss a corner, then I'm probably going to miss a corner too, because I'm so close to them that I won't have time to react. And you're basically just relying on your navigator to, I tell them if that little line squiggles, if it says straight, if it's looking straight, I said, if that line squiggles, let me know, because I need to be prepared. It's just a feeling that I've never experienced anywhere else. You're just in tunnel vision mode, and you're just looking straight forward, just hoping you can break through that dust barrier. The problem is, if our class is kind of turned into a spec class, because we all have Pro Rs basically. Sure. With a couple in this racing organization, we have a little bit of Can-Ams mixed in there as well, but we're all pretty similar speed. So it's not like we're going to be able to have a speed that's going to be able to just gain 10 miles an hour on somebody. We're talking maybe 1 mile an hour. You're trying to break through this dust barrier. And man, sometimes you have to hit the brakes. It's so scary because you don't know. I mean, and then you'll finally break through that dust barrier past the person, and then you'll see a boulder in the middle of the course that you have to go around, and you're like, man, if I would have hit that would have ripped my entire suspension off. It's just hard to comprehend what you're seeing once you're out of the dust. Wow, that would have been something bad. That could have been something bad. But it's an adrenaline rush like no other, trying to drive through that dust at those speeds.
It is such a a challenge mentally, because you're in a race and you want to go fast, but you've got to hold back somewhat, right? And you're straining your eyes, you're straining your brain. You're like, what was that? What is that? The only, I always use the analogy of that scene from Star Wars where he puts the helmet on and gives him the lightsaber and says, now you got to fight, right? And he's like, what? And that's what driving cars in dust is like, you're getting these little glimpses really, really fast. And then boom, you see a car or an obstacle or whatever, and you've got to make this little quick adjustment, and you can't oversteer. That would cause you to crash, especially when you're 80 miles an hour plus, right?
Yeah, there's a lot of variables that happen at that speed that could really make a detrimental impact on your race day.
Yeah, I mean, it happens. Every race, somebody somewhere falls victim to pushing too hard in the dust and clipping something.
Yeah.
All right, Chase, number 23. It's 2023. This championship's yours. Let's show these guys what's up.
Easy, boys. It's not over yet. Big dog still gotta eat.
Whatever you say, big dog. Seriously? These fools think I'm fried?
They know the deal.
But it's one of these crazy things. Like I was telling my guys about, Probably one of the worst areas I've ever seen in Baja, down by Chapala Dry Lake, and the fog comes in from the ocean, and there's a silt bed, so it's fog and silt mixed together, and so you go diving into it, and you're like, you can't see anything, and you can see lights, and what the locals used to do, they don't do it so much anymore, but they used to put fires along the edge of it. So you're like, okay, that's the edge. If I stay within this range and power through, I should be good. But it was a couple years ago, and we went and pre-ran that section, and what it was silt and then these huge cliffs. So you're driving, and like you just drop down into a cliff, and you hope you end up not on your side stuck, right? And you're blind and everything. And then it was even worse if you were chasing, right? Because you're on the highway and all this silt is blowing in and fog. And so like I can see the guy's taillights in front of me, and he's like 10, 15 feet in front of me. We're going 5 miles an hour. And then a car's coming the other way, and I'm like, man, I hope they could see me. You know, we have every light that we had on the truck on,
Right.
and it still didn't matter.
Yeah, it's that's a different experience. You know, that's one of the most difficult ones to experience is fog and dust mixed together. And then it turns, if you do get enough fog and enough dust on your visor, it turns to mud.
Yeah.
And then you're trying to wipe it. And then it's getting to the point where the mist is so bad, and it's basically just beads of water running down, and then the dust sticks to it. That's one of the most difficult environments to drive in is the dust and the silt, or the silt and the mist mixed together, or the fog.
Yeah, especially the closer to the ocean you are, because then you're getting all the salt water, and it's like sticky. You know what I mean?
Yep.
So yeah, the environment that you guys have to race in, I mean, it's the most challenging environment. It's funny, like I watch other forums race, and they're like, oh, there's, a little bit of moisture in the air. And I'm like, come on.
Yeah,
like,
theirs is basically a controlled environment, where ours is different because we cross so much, land that the weather could change so much, especially in Baja, especially at a point to point. You're changing so much, it's, or even this race, we're going from, north of Vegas all the way up to the top of Nevada there, and I mean the weather's probably going to change a couple times throughout the day. It's going to start
100%
hot,
it
it's
is.
going to end cold, and
we've got some rain, coming in. So there's going to be spots where I think you guys are going to get rain. There's water on the course currently, right? And a couple spots from the snow melt. Everybody thinks like, oh yeah, you guys race in the desert. It's like a dry lake bed. And I'm like, come on out and check it out.
Yep, nobody gets it until you're actually there.
Yeah, it's one of the things that I love too about racing. This style of racing too is like those environmental challenges. Like looking at stuff and going, oh shit, how are we going to get over this? And how are we going to get over it fast? And whether it's like, the gnarliness of the technical stuff and the rough stuff in Barstow to, in Baja, we drive over mountains. I mean, the summit is no joke,
Yeah, it's gnarly.
It's a rock crawl, right? Yeah. And so like you just have to save your equipment and get over it clean without getting a flat. Because if you get a flat, you're on a grade, you're off camber, and you're plugging up the course, right? There isn't like, oh, I'll just pull over here and change the tire.
Yep.
What in your racing career, has there been a moment where you got stuck in a situation like that and you were just like, oh man?
Let's see here. Man, we've had some pretty good luck. I don't know how to explain it, but we've had some pretty good luck that never really been in a position where I was like, man, I don't know what to do to get out of this spot.
Bottlenecks.
Yeah, bottlenecks for sure. I guess I didn't even think of that. I seem to get caught in those almost every time. And in the worst spot, like the person in front of me gets stuck, and then the rest of everybody in front of that person just drives off, and I just watch my race go away, which happened at last year's Baja 1000. It was frustrating to be in the first 100 miles running a really good race and having the person in front of you get stuck, and watching the people in front of me that were in my class drive away from me, which was like 4 people, fast people. And I'm like, well, there goes my race. I mean, how am I going to catch them? And, in your head, that all you're thinking about is, man, I spent so much time and effort, and to have something out of my hands cause this issue, because, I mean, you're just sitting there, and then on the summit where it happens, usually there's not an option. It's not like you just make your own. Usually in the UTVs, if there's a bottleneck, it's usually in silt.
Yeah.
Silt, we can go around. We can stop in it usually with four-wheel drive or all-wheel drive and drive around it all. In any speed, we don't have to keep our momentum up like the two-wheel drive vehicles. Well, when you're on the side of a mountain and it's hard to see even from the helicopter views, it doesn't look like it's a mountain, like as steep as it is. But believe me, there's no way to get around anybody that's stuck on a summit. So you basically have to wait till that person fixes their vehicle or can get enough out of the way that you can go around. But yeah, it had to happen at the 1,000, and gosh, that is frustrating. It's just to watch everybody, drive away. And then once you finally get around, it's basically like all war breaks loose because everybody behind you is all ready to go. And then I was like clean air for a long time. And we actually made a ton of time up and actually was able to win that race, which was beyond me. But we had no problems. We didn't have to get out of the vehicle for anything that race. So, I mean, that makes a big difference. But yeah, I guess that's one example of just something that is out of your control. And you have to deal with it as it comes, and it's frustrating. But you just keep pushing.
Yeah. So, what was do you know what that gap was that the field gapped you?
About 20 minutes or so, 20, 25 minutes.
And was that at the summit?
Yeah.
So you get stuck behind somebody at the summit,
and the four people in front of me that were in my class got about a 25-minute advantage at that point.
And then you still win the 1,000.
Still win the 1,000.
Like the mental fortitude and discipline that takes, because at that point you're just kind of. You're basically defeated mentally.
I was. It's gosh, and my navigator's really good. Skylar's really good at talking me back into it. The race is still long. We're still at 100 miles into an 800 and something 900 mile race. So I mean, that's still a long ways to go, and a lot can happen. And I was like, well, we've got nothing to lose. Let's push as hard as we can and see what happens. The car's either going to break or it's not, and it's 50-50, So we went for it, and somehow the thing held together the entire race, and handed off a car to my other driver at like 500, and he had a good race and had no issues. And
who's driving with you that year?
So believe it or not, I just have a buddy. His name's Eric. He works for Polaris. He's a district sales manager for Polaris. He's never really had much racing experience, but he's one of my buddies that goes riding a lot. I mean, being a Polaris employee, he goes riding a lot. He leads rides, and I've been going to the desert with him, the sand dunes a lot with him, and a lot of our trips are together when we go recreationally riding. So I've been watching him over the last few years, and he doesn't crash. He's smooth, and he's fast. I mean, that's basically the three things. I'll prep it.
Yeah.
As long as they don't crash it, they're smooth and they're fast. That's a great driver. So
that ability though to like, get a car. And did you finish?
Nope. I went from 0 to about 500, and then I went to like 0 to 450, and then he went from like 450 to 800. So he finished.
Wow. Okay. That's remarkable. But that ability to like dial it back and go like, hey, I'm going to stay clean. Like that's super important.
Yeah. So then my biggest feat was a couple years ago, we did the Peninsula run, and it was like the third longest, I want to say. It was like 12:36 or something like that. That was when we went to La Paz a couple years ago. That one, I did two drivers, and we were in a great position to win it. Basically, so I'd planned on starting it and going to like 450, then getting out at 450 and having him get in and go to 800 something, and then me get back in at 800 something and go to the 12 something. So I was going to do like 800 miles total.
Right.
Well, I figured I'd start the race and get out. It was like 9 p.m. and I put him in, and we were leading the race at that point. I'm like, oh man. So in my head and on paper, when I was planning the race, I'm like, oh, I'll get in the chase truck. I'll go to sleep for 8 hours. He's going to be racing for 8 hours. I'll wake up refreshed. And just out of Laredo there, I was like, I'll wake up, get back in the car. Well, as soon as I got out of the car into my chase truck, the one that wasn't supposed to go to any pits that the new driver was going to go to, I got in there and I said, that's my car. We're in first. Take me to every single pit. I want to make sure that thing's perfect. Right. So the whole sleeping part of my plan went out the window.
Yeah.
We went to every single pit. And so I got out of the car at like 9 p.m. and we went to every single pit. I made sure the car was perfect in every single pit. And I got back in the car at 8 a.m. The sun was up, obviously. I hadn't slept.
Yeah.
And I had to go another 400-something miles to the finish. So I got back in the car at like 8 a.m., drove to like 2 or 3 p.m. the next day, and I was mentally shot. It was brutal. I mean, we led the race all the way up till the very end, and I had a small issue that we had to address, got past, and lost to Blurton. Blurton's a very good competitor.
Yeah.
So if I'm gonna lose to anybody, that's probably gonna be him, you know. And
Yeah.
and so we went 1-2 there, and just amazing to see what the mind can do. Because I mean, when I had to get back in that car after not sleeping all night and racing the entire day before,
Yeah.
that was pretty remarkable, and to be able to pull that off and have a great finish. And then we went to Cabo and partied. So
And still didn't get any sleep.
No, we did not, because we drove to the finish. The finish line was in La Paz, and I said, "Well, we've got an Airbnb in Cabo, so let's go."
Yeah.
So we drove from La Paz over to Cabo, and we all celebrated and had a good time.
So Mitch, why is this bike so drippy?
It's our 23 race bike. We can start up front, work our way to the back. Bones can tell you about the suspension.
The rear shock is one of the most critical parts of the bike.
Pegs with the titanium mounts.
Kashima coating here.
Anti-gravity lightweight battery.
Young's modulus.
Horse and a half.
Works chassis lab.
More tie than a space shuttle.
Really? I might need that repeated.
This thing slaps.
Slaps.
Oh, you should have told me that earlier.
It's funny what you discover your mind and body can do when you push it.
Mm-hmm.
You know, and it's one of the reasons why I love the Peninsula run is, you know, whether you're racing or chasing, it's the same thing. And like, I always do this thing of like pretending like, you know, I don't care, I can go to sleep or whatever, and that lasts for about an hour, and then I'm like, okay, what's going on?
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And it's so fun. You know, I was talking to Kevin Croyer yesterday about this, about, you know, he still chases, right? And, you know, when you're doing a Peninsula run, it's 20 hours in the car. Like you're stopping to take leaks maybe, and that's it. And so it's a grind, and it's all through the night. And, you know, you're following the teams, and you're on the radio, and now we're able to watch tracking to kind of see where everybody's at. We've got Starlinks on our trucks and stuff like that.
And that's what I was going to say a little bit. That's changed a little bit, because if you don't have the ability to check where your vehicle's at while you're in a chase truck, it's a lot easier to sleep. Now with the Starlink or even better cell phone service, I sat there and just refresh. Yeah. If I didn't have that and I didn't have service, I probably would have been be able to sleep a little bit. But now with this technology, I'm able to just sit there and focus on that little dot and be like, okay, it's still going if I'm not in the vehicle, you know. So
it's so funny too, because like, you know, I love it, but it's this thing that's so savage, you know what I mean? Like in the commitment from the race teams, the chase crews, all the people, the volunteers, you know, it's such a badass, you know, sport, and it's such a badass culture, and in particular Ball 1000 is such a badass race. You know, there's not a year that goes by where I'm not like fiending, you know what I mean? Going like, I want to be there, I want to watch it. And even if I'm not there, like there's been a couple of years where I'm not there, it's like, you know, I'll wake up at 2:00 in the morning, and the first thing that's in your brain is like, I wonder where everybody's at.
Yep.
Right. And you look at the tracking, and you're like, oh man, okay, so-and-so's leading it. And then I'm trying to figure out who's leading it in the UTVs.
Yep.
But no, it's totally unique. A few years ago, we were asked to film 24 Hours of Daytona, and I was super excited about it. You know, it was like legendary race and all this kind of stuff. So in preparation for it, we went to the test. I think it's called the Roar before Daytona or whatever, right? And got acclimated with the track and kind of the run of show and everything. And you know, so then the race comes up, and my guys, like, we've all done multiple Bajas and had to shoot, edit in the car, upload, you know, stop and upload clips, like, you know, just really cool but wild stuff. And it's like virtually no sleep. And, you know, you're kind of pumped on adrenaline. Like you kind of nod off for a second, but then, you know, something comes over the radio and you're like, wait, what? Right. Yeah. And your adrenaline is back up. It's like this roller coaster, right?
Yep.
So we're at 24 Hours of Daytona, and you know, there's TV coverage and all this stuff. And we're kind of, you know, getting where we could go, where we were allowed to go. They were very strict. But it was really funny because, you know, it's a track, and the infield, like, they have catering and all this stuff, right? All the, you know, nice bathrooms and all this stuff to make you comfortable. And so it's like, I think it was like 6 or 7 o'clock, and and I'm standing, with a camera, with one of my camera operators, in a corner, and they had, we picked this corner because we knew like it was lit, and we know there's problems in this one hairpin, so we're expecting drama. And then there's the big tower with the TV camera and everything, and like all of a sudden the light goes off. The guy walks out of the tower, and I'm like, "Where are you going?" And he goes, "Oh, we're going home. We'll see you guys in the morning." I'm like, "You don't show the night racing?" He's like, "No." I'm like, "But all you have to do is stand right here and film it."
Right.
Like when we're doing it in Baja, we stop at a pit or we stop at a location, we get shots, we hop in the car, drive a couple 100 miles to the next shot, right? Yeah. As we're editing, downloading footage or whatever, and I'm like, huh. Right. I go, so I had to bribe the guy. I'm like, "Hey, can you leave the light on for us?" And he goes, "Well, like, here's $100. He's like, "Okay." So he leaves the light on in the corner, which I also thought was funny because I was like, well, if you're a race car, like now the corner's lit.
Yeah.
Right. So it was just hilarious because we shot through the whole night and we captured some really cool stuff. And, and then these guys show back up like right before the sun is coming up, and they're back, and it's back, and here's what happened overnight and a recap of the night. And I'm like, huh, you guys have all the luxuries in the world, but you're not documenting all this drama that's going on all night. And here we are driving, all the way all over the Baja Peninsula, crazy, all night, shooting stuff. And frankly, we're only getting a little tiny piece of the action. We're not telling the whole story. So it was funny to see the difference between, their mentality and our mentality. You know?
For sure.
And the fans too. Like, that's one of the things I love about the 1000 is I remember very clearly this experience that I had in Guerrero Negro, watching the trophy trucks come through. And in particular, Tavo Vidosla, I think he was about in third position. So the first couple trucks come through, and it's a big road crossing with a jump and just thousands of spectators, and they're close to the course. So you can hear the vehicles coming, and you've crossed this one too. It's like you can hear them shift down. It's like, and they hit the road crossing 30, 40 miles an hour, and everybody's going, yeah. Right. And it's, at that point, it's probably 2:00 in the morning or something. And then we hear Tavo coming, right? It's like, brrr, and then you hear him shift up, right? And it's like faster and faster and faster. Pretty soon it's like he hits that road crossing at probably just short of 100 miles an hour, probably 90 miles an hour, just completely sends it, lands probably 150 feet past everybody else, and you can hear him getting on the accelerator as he's landing. And it was just like one of those things of like he was so in the zone that he didn't care that all these fans, I'm sure he cared, but he knew he's like, hey, I'm going to thread the needle here. I'm going to go win this race, right? And that wasn't the year that he won, but like it was one of the most wildly spectacular things I've seen ever in racing. And if you hadn't done the work to drive all the way down to Guerrero Negro and stay up till 2:00 in the morning, you'd have never seen it.
Right.
You know what I mean? So that's one of the things I love about chasing is getting those moments.
Yeah, for sure. Sure.
Has there been anything like when you've been racing that, you I don't know, you almost hit an animal, hit a jump, booby trap that you're like, holy shit, this is gnarly?
Man, with all the different experiences I've had, obviously Mexico's usually got the most diverse and adversity that you could probably endure or come across in any kind of racing, just because there's basically no rules. I've had some pretty wild experiences in Mexico as far as, there is booby traps. I'd say 90% of the fans out there are cheering you on to, do well, and they're excited to see you go by. Then you've got 10% of them that want to see a crash, or they want to see something happen. They want to see excitement. So it's brutal to see that kind of it. I've never been in a position where I felt like there was anything that really, I guess the only thing I've had is some follow some people through some cut lines or some interesting lines and get to them, and had gates locked in front of me, which is a little weird. But man, I haven't really had any bad experiences, thankfully. I mean, I've hit some booby traps, but they were nothing more than a poorly made jump.
Yeah.
They don't know the trajectory of making a good jump. Usually, it's usually just a nice big hump.
Yeah.
And it causes you to, you know, not jump very, very well, or there will be ditches or dips. But other than that, I mean, we've had some really good experiences. Nothing really, besides a couple crashes that were, I had a pretty good crash last year that was something, it was a different experience that I've never really seen before or been in before. So it was kind of I was racing a fast race last year, Silver State 300, and it was on a high-speed dirt road with a crest. And on the other side, it was just a long downhill. Usually, and we're racing at this level, you're going over crest, as long as it's straight, you're pretty much wide open.
Right.
I mean, you have to be able to race at the top. You can't just check up everywhere. So you're pushing the limits, obviously. So I come over this crest last year and probably doing 80 miles an hour, and halfway over this crest, it was enough of a crest where it kind of made your suspension barely drop out, not where you're like just flying away, but your suspension get light, you don't really have any steering or braking, and then, you know, the weight comes back to the car. Well, as soon as the weight came back to the vehicle, there was an upside down vehicle right in front of me in the middle of the course, and I couldn't, if I slammed on the brakes, I would have just literally skidded and hit to the top of his cage, because he was facing uphill with the cage facing up. So I was able to actually yank the wheel sideways, get my car sideways, and it kind of T-boned him like this. It spun me, and then we flipped all the way down this hill. Come to a stop, and I realized there were still people in that race vehicle that we hit.
Wow.
So thankfully, I was able to get the vehicle that I was in scrub enough speed and hit it not directly, you know, head on.
Sideways.
Yeah, so I was able to spin around it. And because I think if I would have hit it head on, I think it would have been a pretty bad situation, or at least, you know, because they were still buckled in.
Yeah.
They didn't get out of the vehicle yet. So my bumper would have just, you know, caved in their roof. I don't know what would have happened, but thankfully we didn't have that issue. But so after we finished crashing, and I'm listening because I want to get out of the car. I'm in a bad spot. I don't want somebody else to come over there, miss that car, then hit me, because it was kind of like we're blocking the entire road now.
Right.
So we got out of the vehicle. You know, I listened and made sure there was nobody's coming, because I didn't want to be out of the vehicle and get hit too. So got out of the vehicle, and I yelled up at them, you know, get out of the vehicle. There's nobody coming. You need to get out. You know, this is not safe. So got them out. And then that was one of the most adverse situations I've probably been in, because there's two vehicles upside down in the middle of the course now, and still race traffic. This was towards the front of the class. So there's still a lot of vehicles coming.
Sure.
Nobody was really, we didn't really have any way besides, you know, hitting the crash button to let somebody know that there was a hazard. We did that. We got the cars flipped back over. I took back off. Somehow mine didn't get destroyed. I mean, a lot of tubes were bent, but the suspension was all on and the tires were still on, and I was in the middle of nowhere, so I wanted to get out of there. I offered to help the other guys get their car back over, but it was in pretty bad shape, and they were just going to let it. Come to find out, that car got hit again later on in the race by another racer. So I don't know really what happened, if they weren't flagging anybody down. I don't really know what happened, but another person in our class hit him. And so that was one of the most adverse situations I'd been in, because there wasn't really much I could do. There was really nobody flagging us down to slow down, because they weren't even out of the car yet. There was no hazard button that was pushed. So that was one of the most adverse situations I've been in racing, and it sucked.
Yeah.
I can't really blame anybody. It was just a bad situation.
Yeah, it's crazy, you know, when stuff happens, it happens so quick.
So quick.
You know, but good on you for being able to manipulate the car so you didn't T-bone them, because I think, you know, that kind of action where you're T-boning another car sideways is the worst impact that can happen.
Would have been terrible.
You know, so yeah, no, it's dangerous. It's interesting because, you know, I don't think people realize, you know, how quickly things can go wrong in racing, especially people who haven't had big crashes. They're like, oh, like I always see these young kids move up the ranks, and you know, they get faster and faster and faster. And I'm like, okay, I hope your crash, because you're gonna have one at some point. I hope it's not, you know, a bad one.
Yeah.
You know, because once you have that experience, you're like, cool. All right, now I'm going to reel back a little bit, right, and be a little bit more cautious. I remember asking Rob Mack about this specifically in as it relates to charging dust. And I go, well, I was expecting him to impart some magical wisdom on me, right? And he goes, I go, well, what do you do? And he goes, well, I slow down.
Yeah.
I'm like, oh, okay, that's not the answer I wanted, but it is words of wisdom, right? So no, that's awesome. Obviously you got a race to go win. So good luck.
Thank you.
At this race, at the Vegas Reno race. It's your style race. You're positioned perfectly, and I look forward to seeing more success with your career. Thank you for doing this, man.
Thank you, Matt. Always.